Here we are for the Ten of Wands in Learning the Tarot series. So this card is one of those fun ones where the upright is not necessarily the good meaning and the reversed is kind of the better option. So if the Ten of Wands is upright, this is telling you you need to evaluate some stuff. Basically, at this point, you need to look at the burdens that you're carrying and decide, is it worth it? This could be, are my goals realistic? Am I carrying too much? Are my expectations too high? Again, going along with the example we have been for this entire time with the wands, this is the point where it's like maybe our starting point of where we're trying to get to should not be to be in competition with like Stephen King, Anne Rice, J.K. Rowling, even like John Grisham. Authors, even probably like John Green, let's just be honest. I don't know how much he makes from book sales versus all of the other adventures him and his brother do, but like, let's just be real. The authors that are really big names that are making so much money and like it's a household name, you mention pretty much any of those and you will at least know like 3 out of 5 of them. Whether or not you've read it, you at least know the name. When you have that as like the goal, you kind of get real disappointed when you realize you might be more of like a Mandy Lynn or Kate Kavanaugh, where you're making money, you're being able to support yourself. You might need some help with like a partner or whatever, but you don't have to have a side job anymore to sustain your life. And there's plenty of authors out there that are making a living doing what they're doing and they're happy with it, but they're not like a household name. You'll say their name and you're like, who? But then you look and they've published a bunch of books, they have a steady following, and they have a steady stream of books that they're writing. For example, like Nora Roberts, I think she's pretty, like, relatively famous. I'd never heard of her till I got into, like, the writing community, and everyone was like, dude, she publishes, like, 4 books a year. And it's like, oh, so, like, goals. But then that was one of those things, like, with this card specifically that kind of came up of, like, is that realistic for me, though? I think eventually it could possibly be, because I do have a number of books that I want to write, but it would be more like a switch off between fiction and like a witchy book back and forth, and I don't know how many witchy books realistically I want to write. Like, I have a handful that I want to. So it would be like a short-lived time. Like, I'm not gonna be probably writing 4 books a year, but maybe eventually if I got a system in place where like if I'm in the revision stage, I would have like revision day, writing day kind of a thing. Like eventually I could see that. But the reality is that if I set that as my goal, it will fail. I've done it plenty of times. There's been many a time where I'm like, listen, if I publish a book a month, I can have this many books published by the time I'm 30. And here we are. And I'm like, listen, let's make that way more realistic. And I feel like that is what the Nine of Wands is warning us about. Because you also will probably have some level of exhaustion, especially if you have really high expectations of what you're wanting and it's just not there. Not everyone is going to have a Carrie situation where suddenly you get a check for like $250,000 for your first manuscript. That's not realistic. That's not gonna happen. And when it doesn't happen, you can beat yourself up and try harder and harder and harder and just burn yourself out. And I feel like the Nine of Wands is just reminding you, like, that exhaustion, that tired that you're feeling on the journey right now, that's valid, but we need to analyze like why. So ironically, when this card's reversed, it's the opposite. All of the weight on your shoulders is lifted at this point. So you're able to set boundaries and expectations and maintain those. So for example, you might set the expectation that I'm gonna publish 2 books a year, one in the summer, one in like the winter or whatever. And you maintain that, and you maintain the boundary to be able to do that. You set time aside that no matter what, this amount of time a week, I will hit whatever my goal is. Maybe you want to write for so many hours, have so many chapters written, have a word count goal, whatever. But you set that boundary that your family, the people you live with, whatever, knows that is your boundary and you maintain it yourself. You aren't going to scroll through TikTok. You're not going to go watch Netflix. You are going to sit down and write, kind of a deal. And you know that you need to also be able to give yourself breaks and not burn yourself out at the same time. Also, I feel like this card could be the release of guilt and pressure that other people might have set on you. Again, it might not be just you who's anticipating that if you're going to be a full-time author, you're going to get a deal with a big publishing house and get a huge check in the mail before your book is even published as like the, I can't think of the word, but it's like the pre-paycheck, your pre-royalties before it comes out even onto shelves. It's like they prepay you for the work and they anticipate how much it's going to sell, and then from there eventually other royalties will trickle in. but sometimes it's just like a lump sum and that's might be all you get. And they might have overpaid you sometimes, especially if you go through big publishing houses. Self-published, not nearly as much because you get it like print on demand. So when you get a book sale, it's delayed by like a month or two. So it's not in advance. I think that's what it's called, in advance. It's instead like a delayed payment, which kind of gets obnoxious because you're like, I should have money, and then you have to wait. But regardless, you've set that expectation on yourself, and other people's guilt might not be weighing on you anymore. You know that like this is where it's at and you're okay with that. And what success looks like for you, you're okay with. And it doesn't really matter if it matches up what other people think it should look like. So anyways, that is going to be it for the Ten of Wands. I would love to hear your interpretation of this card in the comments down below. Huge thank you to my patrons. I'll have their names here on the screen if you'd like to support me and get access to exclusive content. It is patreon.com/nightwillowcrafts. Make sure to like and subscribe. I post every single day. And until next time, thank you so much for watching and blessed be.